What's up, everybody? Once again, it's Angelo Gingerelli, stand-up comic and author of Stand Up and Laugh, the zine, available now from Microcosm Publishing. This is the podcast, audiobook of that zine, again, with the hopes of turning that zine and this podcast into a full book and really be able to get information out there and help people that are in emerging comedy scenes move their scene and their career along quicker than they can without that book, that zine, and this podcast. So in this episode, we're going to continue the top 10 ways to be an asset to a comedy scene, and they include support businesses that support the scene, be fair, and always document the scene, whether it be documentaries, YouTube videos, podcasts, whatever it might be. There's so many ways out there now to document what you and your friends are doing. There's never been a better time to kind of commit everything to some kind of online media and let people know what's going on where you live. On the other end of that audiobook segment, we have an interview with Selena Coppock. Selena's a comic from Boston that worked a lot in New York when I was in the city in the mid-2000s. And then she started fairly recently the NYT Val's Instagram account. Class goes to 30,000 followers and just killing the Instagram game. One thing that comes up over and over again on this show and just in comedy in general is that social media and the internet is a part of comedy, whether you like it or not. I mean, Manny Garavito, a couple episodes ago on a Dirty South episode of this very podcast, said it best, which was you're online more than you're on stage. And that's true for just about everybody. So Selena's found a really cool way to kind of make fun of the New York Times wedding section in a way that's amassed a lot of followers. And I think it's interesting because a lot of what you see online about being, internet famous is about breaking the algorithm and kind of cheating and how to get more followers by not producing a lot of content. She produces great, very funny content every day, and that's kind of just, no one really says that. Just be relentlessly funny online the way you try to be on stage, and if you do the right thing, that might pay off for you the way it has for her. So again, we're going to keep moving through the top 10 ways to be an asset to a comedy scene, including supporting businesses that support the scene, being fair, and documenting your scene. And then right after that, we have an interview with Selena Coppock, the very funny comedian and very funny person behind the NYT Val's Instagram account. Let's go. Stand Up and Laugh. Build a comedy scene, produce your own shows, and create community by Angelo Gingerelli is available now on microcosmpublishing.com. If you're trying to make your way in the world of stand-up comedy, you can build your career while enlivening your local comedy community and mutually supporting your fellow humorists, and you can even have fun while doing it. Angelo Gingerelli shares his hard-won advice for anyone who wants to create a comedy scene from scratch in a smaller community, carve out their unique niche in a larger city full of professional funny people, or anywhere in between. Lots of good tips here for anyone organizing community events, from how to book venues, get publicity, and avoid drama. Also includes great arguments for starting or joining a comedy scene rather than thinking of yourself as a lone wolf, and solid wisdom for being an asset to an existing stand-up community. Stand Up and Laugh by Angelo Gingerelli is available now on microcosmpublishing.com. Top 10 ways to be an asset to a local comedy scene, Part 2. Number 4, support venues and local businesses that support the scene. Venues and businesses that support local entertainment are taking a risk. They only have so many nights a week to generate revenue, and if they give one to an open mic, book show, improv, live podcast, or sketch show, they're helping the scene flourish with hopes of turning a profit. A few business owners might be independently wealthy or run the business as a side hustle where making money isn't really the goal, but most of them are depending on the success of the venture to provide for themselves or their families. Therefore, if there are a handful of venues that consistently support local arts and entertainment, people in the scene should go out of their way to support them. If you attend a weekly open mic at a coffee shop, that should also be your coffee shop every time you want a hot beverage. If you produce shows in a bar on Tuesdays and your friends want to hang out on Saturday, you should stop by that bar for at least one drink. If you're doing shows in a pizzeria and they cater parties, why not have them cater your next event? Building these relationships and helping these supportive businesses stay financially solvent will go a long way in making sure you have a place to perform and the overall scene has a chance to develop. Also, keep in mind the power of social media. Tagging the venue that house your events, posting about their other events, and being a, quote, good employee who is committed to making the business successful would not only help the owner continue to keep the doors open, but may help maintain your relationship with them if you have a few rough shows. It's much easier for a venue to end an open mic after a few sparsely attended weeks if the host is not a team player. This can also work in your favor if the venues are mutually supportive. I can't count how many times I've skipped lines, gotten a table immediately, or been handed free stuff at venues I deal with often. The best example of this is Super Open Mic 64, a monthly open mic I started in a retro arcade at the Jersey Shore a few years ago. The arcade owner loves the event and the revenue it generates on slow weeknights in the off-season. To show his appreciation, he always hooks me up if I show up there with my nieces and nephews and gives me a great deal on my daughter's birthday parties. This is a great example of a mutually beneficial relationship that has been great for all of the comics, his business, and my family. Number 5. Be fair. Much like the music, boxing, and political industries, comedy has a tendency to attract an unsavory element. There are countless stories of thievery by agents, managers, promoters, and venues that operate barely within the law. While this has been happening in entertainers since the beginning of time, the issue is compounded today because social media, unpaid shows, and the ever-elusive concept of, quote, exposure that promoters often use to trick newer comics into doing their shows for free make it almost impossible for the talent to make an educated guess as to what they are actually worth to the management. This has created an environment where comics are often barely paid until they are superstars, at which point they presumably make enough money to make up for the years or decades that the industry mistreated them. It doesn't have to be this way. Sure, there are some shows that don't generate any revenue and there's no money to pay anybody. Performing at an open mic should be viewed as going to the gym to work out material, and all gyms have membership fees. But if a show turns a profit and a comic sells tickets, either directly through social media or just through name recognition, they should be paid for their services. Also, if a producer is given a budget to produce a show, some portion of that budget should go to the performers, even if it's only enough to cover gas or transportation. The most important thing in dealing with the financial side of the game is to be fair, as transparent as possible, and clear from the beginning about what is expected and what will be paid. Taking care of these things way before showtime makes everything easier and establishes the producer or promoter as a fair business person who can be trusted in the future. This idea of fairness should extend to matters beyond money. Putting your friends ahead of other people at an open mic, giving people extra stage time, and always booking the same people on shows are all recipes for being branded shady and untrustworthy. Unfortunately, dealing with people in a decent manner is often the exception rather than the rule, but if you want to be an asset to the scene and actually help it flourish, being fair is absolutely necessary. Number 6. Document the scene. There was a time when in order to be the subject of a documentary, you had to do something truly extraordinary, like win multiple Mr. Olympia titles in pumping iron, or eat nothing but McDonald's for a month like Super Size Me. Nowadays, camera phones, user-friendly editing software, and multiple channels of free distribution have made documenting a local art scene accessible for almost everyone. While removing the barriers to entry has definitely lowered the overall quality of documentaries available, there's never been a better time to document what's happening in your immediate surroundings. From feature-length films on streaming services and shorter YouTube videos to podcast conversations and written interviews, there is an almost unlimited number of options to show the world what is going on where you live. The traditional, quote, comedy documentary might have been done too many times to still be an interesting concept, but there are so many other viable ways to document your scene that it's not worth the time and effort to lament its demise. This documentation serves a few purposes that are valuable for the documentarian, subject, and bigger comedy world. The documentarian, whether filmmaker, writer, podcaster, etc., gets content to use on their social media channels and hopefully expands their audience by picking up subscribers who tune in for one episode with a guest they like and become fans of the documentarian's work. Personally, this is how I discover a new podcast. If a comic or musician I like announces they're going to be a guest on a show I've never heard about, I will listen. And if I like the host or format, I will subscribe to the show and follow their social media. The one important factor in this process is that the artist must tell his or her fans that they are going to be on your platform. If a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? Who knows? The same holds true if you land a great guest and nobody knows they were on your show. Meanwhile, the subject gets a piece of media they can use to promote themselves that proves other people are paying attention to what they are doing. This is huge when booking shows and proving to venues and bookers that you have enough of a following to produce a show that will get attention. This credit or resume builder is huge for new comics because it gives them something they can easily share that validates their position as a player in the game. Also, if you have your own media outlet, don't impose a ceiling on the level of guests you can land. In New Jersey, there are a number of websites and podcasts that land interviews with some of the biggest headlining comics in the world when they tour the area. How to contact these superstars and dealing with their agents, managers, and publicists is a topic for another zine, book, or podcast. But realize that it's possible and could be the tipping point of your platform gaining massive popularity. Self-documentation is also great for the scene in general. It's a working history of how things evolve, who comes and goes, and what makes the scene flourish or perish. This information is vital to figuring out what works and what to pursue moving forward. It will also become valuable as the scene grows to have a clear view of how it started, how it grew, and what people and factors led to its current state at any point in time. Finally, if any comic from the area blows up in traditional entertainment industry sense, this early footage will become valuable because their fans will look for it online to see how they started and stumble upon your platform. There is also some chance that if they're ever the subject of a studio-produced documentary, your footage or interview may be valuable to the studio and could lead to future financial compensation. Local arts and entertainment scenes are producing some of the best content in the world and are home to some of the most talented people. Documenting these scenes in a way that will showcase them to the rest of the world is valuable for everybody involved. The Stand Up and Laugh audiobook / podcast. It interviews some of the best names in comedy. We're talking about Chris Gethard, Jersey's own, host of New Jersey's the World, host of the Chris Gethard Show, host of the Beautiful Anonymous podcast. We got Johnny Brennan from the Jerky Boys, a game changer in the 90s, sold millions of albums of prank calls. We got from Arizona, James Petrogallo and Jimmy Wishman, the host of both the Crime and Sports and the Small Town Murder podcast. From the world of heavy metal, we got Don Jameson. He's been on MTV. He's been on VH1. He's on tour with literally every heavy metal hard rock band you ever heard of. From the Dirty South, we got Manny Garavito and Matthew Hahn. From Jersey again, we got John Paul Romo, one of the finest touring comics to ever come out of the Jersey Shore. From Cleveland, Ohio, we got Jim Tews, made a documentary about Cleveland's comedy scene a couple years ago and been killing it ever since. We got some of the Jersey Shore's finest comics, including Joe Borzada, Eric Hollerbeck, Amalis Perduto, all coming to the game from different angles. From Instagram, we got Selena Coppock, the host and the voice behind the NYT Val's Instagram account. And from Comedy Fight Club, we got Matt Marin. The Stand Up and Laugh audiobook / podcast is available now wherever you listen to podcasts, and Stand Up and Laugh is available right now from microcosmpublishing.com. Welcome back to another interview segment of Stand Up and Laugh, the book about building a comedy scene wherever you live. On this episode, we're talking to a comic that is from New England, spent a lot of time in New York City, and has legitimately one of the consistently funny Instagram accounts of anybody out there, in my opinion. She has a huge following. She crushes every day on IG. And I just want to talk to her a little about what it was like in Massachusetts, what happened when she got to New York, and how do you transfer from being a successful stand-up comic, performing a lot, releasing albums, to this kind of Instagram personality that really, you don't need to be in New York City or LA to be successful on Instagram. And she happens to be in New York City, but she could be doing that from anywhere in the world. So without further ado, please welcome Selena Coppock. Selena, how you doing today?
Hey there, I'm great, Angelo. Thank you so much for having me on.
Great. I'm super excited to talk to you because I believe we may have performed together a few times back in the day. I really liked your album, Seen Better Days, a couple of years ago. And then I consistently smile and laugh at your Instagram account, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But get into where are you from? What was the comedy scene like there? And what prepared you to make the move into New York City?
Totally. Yes, these are all great questions. So I grew up in the suburbs of Boston in a town called Weston. And I started, so I did some improv in college. I went to Hamilton College in upstate New York, and I did improv there. And improv is such a, good sort of entryway into stand-up, I think, just to feel comfortable on stage, to feel comfortable making it up and riffing. So then after college, I moved to Chicago to do more improv and I only lasted 1 year. Depression's a bitch. And then I came back to Boston, and that's where I got into stand-up. And the Boston stand-up scene, I mean, this was 2003 to 2006 or so. And the Boston stand-up scene was very small. There were not a ton of shows. There was like one open mic on Monday nights at the Green Dragon or something it was called. It was, but there are also these wonderful pockets too. I mean, there was always the Comedy Studio in Harvard Square, which is now in Inman Square, and is just such a wonderful, just a warm, cool, interesting place of exploration, and such, they book such great acts. And back then there was what was it? There was that big comedy club like in Faneuil Hall. But I always felt like Boston was a great place to start and kind of cut your teeth and be terrible before you go to a bigger market. Because then I moved to New York in late 2006. And I moved to New York because I've been doing stand up for about 2 years and I felt kind of ready to have a have more challenges and have more exposure to mics and shows and different people producing stuff. And I work in publishing during the day. So New York made all kinds of sense. So I moved to New York in, late 2006, fall 2006. And when I first got here, I couldn't believe like there were multiple open mics every single night. I mean, there was just so much opportunity for stage time and grinding and finding your voice. Like, I think if I'd been doing one open mic a week in Boston, it just everything's slower because it's just, you're learning 10 minutes at a time. And so to be able to just like move to New York and, even if you're just going to shows one night, another night you're doing a mic, another night, maybe you're taking a storytelling class at UCB. Like, I mean, I really just started firing on all cylinders when I got to New York. And it's, it's such a much bigger scene. So there's so many more different types of rooms to play, or, there's sketch, there's storytelling, there's improv, there's stand up. And, and I really loved the combination of like stand up and storytelling and, rooms that would kind of do both of those. Or even, when I took storytelling classes at UCB and met so many great people that way and then produced shows with those people. So, I mean, I think it's very wise though to start in a smaller market. And I don't know, now it just seems like you don't have to move to LA or New York. There are so many wonderful comedy cities where you can have a really cool and rewarding career and you can do a ton of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I've been to Boston a couple times, never as a performer. I just have some friends up there and some personal stuff. But it seems like a city from the outside. It's produced some of the best comics in the world have come through there, right? And kind of cut their teeth there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have a bunch of colleges in the area. You have a cool arts entertainment scene. Whereas, like, if you're a younger comic, which is a new comic, you don't have to be younger, but just new to the game, you can kind of do your mics and improv and take classes. But then a couple times a week, you could probably go see some of the biggest names in the world in Boston, right?
Yes. Oh, totally. Exactly. And it's interesting, like exactly as you say, because there's a young community there and so many college kids. And also it's a very liberal city. So I feel like, you can do some stuff that maybe is like some real risk taking or kind of a little bit out there artistically. And usually you'll find your audience, which is really cool.
Yeah, I like that. Now, you said you made the progression from Boston to New York in right about 2006, and we're coming up on 15 years since then. How has the New York scene changed since the mid 2000s until now? What have you seen come and go? What are the big changes? I'm assuming social media is one of the big changes. But what else?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, first off, I can't believe I'm about to hit 15 years in New York. I mean, that is so bonkers to me. Like before I came here, I thought this place was going to chew me up and spit me out. But, it's evolved so much. I mean, when I first moved to New York, there were not very many writing opportunities in New York as far as comedy writing for either late night shows or sitcoms or even like, shows on MTV or talking head stuff. Like, it seemed as though all of that was in Los Angeles. And, there was Letterman, but yeah, I mean, that was a writer's room that rarely changed. Like there wasn't a lot of movement there. And it was fascinating to watch so many more shows, start just like, I mean, Colbert happened. Actually, my brother-in-law used to write for the Colbert Report. And then a lot more TV shows started filming in New York. So you have like Red Oaks that always has like 3 or 4 comedy writers on staff. I'm sorry, not Red Oaks. Marvelous Mrs. Maisel always has 3 or 4 comedians on staff writing. And there was always SNL, but I don't know. To me, it seemed as though I know so many more people who are writing for assorted shows in New York than I ever used to know. And as you said, it's interesting the way that social media opened some of those doors. Like I remember when Sarah Schaefer and Nikki Glazer had their TV show on MTV, and that was back when Michelle Wolf was just like crushing on Twitter. I mean, just cranking out one-liners. She was such a solid joke writer. I mean, and obviously still is. but it's before nobody knew who Michelle Wolf was. And I remember, I think she was asked, I'd heard that like she was asked to submit a packet for that show from her Twitter. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of like, wow, people got noticed from their Twitter, and I have a lot of friends where that was the case. And, either they got the gig from so much social media. And it's fascinating the way it's enabled comedians to really control their own thing, like I remember when I first moved here, I was in a sketch trio called Walking Contradiction. It was me and Keisha Zoller and Heidi Edsel. And Keisha has gone on, they're all doing great things, but we would put on real sketch shows like at UCB or at the Parkside Lounge, and you drag all your props on the subway, and maybe you get 10 friends to come out, and and now, you can just make a video and you can reach 1 million people, and you don't even have to leave your couch. Yeah, it's so different. And it's interesting too, the people you can connect with on social media, like I've done, for, like podcasts or shows or whatever from people who just know, like who we've just become friends online. And yeah, it's really fascinating how it's changed. And I feel like the New York scene, I feel like I've seen it evolve so much. And even now I hear that like, there's sort of this younger generation and they came up on Zoom and like,
yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. To be like, people cut their teeth on Zoom and now are like, oh, okay, comedy clubs are open. I guess I can try this. And oh my gosh, like it's just so fascinating to think there's an entire generation of stand-up comedians who started on Zoom or with TikTok videos,
Yeah. And I think one thing that's interesting about comics in our quote unquote class, if you will, that you came into the city in 2006. I started going to mics in the city in 2007, right? And we're part of a generation that got to see both sides of that, right?
Yes.
Like I remember the world before social media, and now I'm able to operate in social media, right? People older than us are having a much harder time making the transition. People younger than us don't know the world without it. I feel like one thing our age group or our comedy class, if you will, is lucky about is we've seen both sides. You know what I mean? Because I think you see some younger people that maybe come up only online and have to make a transition to get good on stage, right? And that could be a rough thing for some people. And then you see some older comics that were great on stage for a very long time struggle to make the transition online. I think people in our group are hopefully a little better at both sides because you came up having to do both. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I do. And you know what? I find that to be such a refreshingly positive way to think of it. Like I joke around with my friends from like our generation in New York comedy. And I joke around sometimes that I feel like we're the sort of forgotten class because, like a lot of us were trying to get past at comics and then comics closed. And, like a lot of us were trying to make inroads at, even like smaller, lesser known clubs, and all those clubs collapsed. Or, like getting in with even certain indie bookers who were, booking Union Hall and stuff. And then a lot of those bookers ended up moving on and, moving out of the city and moving and so, yeah. And then meanwhile, there was this younger class that was like, why are you wasting your time doing a show at, such and such venue? Just tweet. And, but I think it's such a positive way to think about that. Like, no, it's lucky that we have feet in both camps because exactly. I could think of nothing more embarrassing than thinking that you cut your teeth, that your comedy is just like Zoom or TikTok. And then when you're in a showroom and a heckler is coming for you, you don't know what to do,
Yeah, I think it's really got to be both. I think the smarter, younger people are trying to get good at both. And you can argue it's even harder because you got to like divert your energy into two different mediums to some extent.
Yeah.
I think that's just the way the world is. And I have a very positive outlook on that, which I appreciate acknowledging that. But I will say one negative for our generation is like one of my lifelong goals was to have a book in bookstores. I put a book out. There's hardly any bookstores left, right?
Yeah.
One of my next goals is to record a special and have a CD out. Where are you buying a CD in 2021? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Like,
that's hilarious.
Yeah. I feel like I'm doing a good job of, checking my goals off, but like technology just one step ahead, beat me to it. But hopefully we'll get, we'll sell the books online, get the special up on Spotify like you did and just do it the way it is now. And I think that's a great transition from talking about how younger comics are using social media to how you're using social media. Talk about your Instagram account that's got over 25,000 followers. And it's like I said in the beginning of the show, consistently hilarious. Tell us about it.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so proud of it. I think I've been doing it, for about 5 years. It's called NYT Vows, literally NYT VOWS. And it's Instagram and Twitter, and it is me pretending to be the New York Times wedding section. And I'm, and it's a really fun satire account, and I parody everything. Like I lampoon like wedding traditions, I lampoon courtship rituals. Like I do make fun of New York centric stuff and the New York Times in particular. But I think that one thing I'm really proud of is that I have a ton of followers who are from abroad, or they're from cities all over America and, all over the US, and they get it and they dig it. So it's not just like New York jokes. Like it's universal jokes about what it's like to be, a groomsman or a bridesmaid, and, like cash bar at a wedding and like that kind of thing. But it's been really fun because I think I've sort of honed in on the voice of the account. And I think, and it's like in stand-up how they say you really, like, you have to find your voice. And I remember when I was young in Boston, they're like, you have to find your voice. And I just didn't really get what that meant. And after a couple of years, I was like, oh, now I get it. Like, and I think the NYT Vows voice is so distinct and I love it so much. Like I always just picture basically like my late aunt, who's so wonderful, but like she was a socialite. She belonged to all the correct country clubs in East Hampton and in Manhattan too. She wore a lot of like frosted pink lipstick. Like it's just, it's sort of this old grande dame who it's almost like Lucille Bluth from Arrested Development. Like I adore her, where she means well, but she's so wealthy that she doesn't get it, like I think one of my favorite angles to play with is just that she's like, jobs. Everyone's talking about these jobs. What, you don't just get inheritance money. What's going on? Where do you go to an office all day? And it's been so much fun to do. And yeah, I sort of can't get over the following because I'm like, it's just little old me, like I'm just tweeting these things from my iPhone 6 and I'm just having a blast.
I think one reason why it amassed such a following, and I think why I appreciate it, as anyone who's ever planned a wedding gets the wedding stuff, right? And that's universal. That's not just New York City, right? Mm-hmm. But then the other thing I think you hit on really good is like there's characters like Lucille Bluth from Arrested Development. There's shows like Gossip Girl. We're even if you're like I'm nowhere near that New York City elite that you're lampooning, right? Mm-hmm. But I see enough of it in the mass media where it's like I get the jokes, and I think that's where you really hit that sweet spot between anybody that's ever been a part of a wedding appreciates the wedding stuff, and everyone else has seen enough of this New York City aristocrat lifestyle on TV that we can get every single post.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love it. And thank you so much. Oh, I've had such a terrible week and you are giving me such a wonderful boost. I appreciate it.
But, no, man, I appreciate it. Go ahead.
But yeah, it is like, because exactly, I mean, in stand-up, we always talk about the idea of like, not punching down, like always be punching up. And that's why I think it's so fun to mock the super wealthy, because I'm punching up and, like they are absurd. I mean, and exactly. Like, I think there is such an awareness of that level of sort of wealth and privilege. And I think it feels really lovely and just to be mocking it, like, I mean, I grew up, I'd say upper middle class. And then I went to college and I went to, a private college, and like, people, I remember freshman year, everyone rolled up and they all knew each other because they'd gone to the same boarding school, and a lot of them drove Range Rovers. And I was just like, what? Like, and I swear those 4 years at Hamilton College really pay off. Like, I just, it's just like knowing certain things about like different people who like, they go to St. Bart's every year, or, like just having those little reference points that speak to that. Yeah. Like really privileged experience of the New York City elite. It's so fun to make fun of. And I think that I'm just really proud of the fact that like, I'm not really mocking anyone in particular. I'm mocking an idea. I'm mocking a large group of people. But, on Sundays, I'll like, read the actual New York Times wedding section, and I'll take a photo of the newspaper, and then I give a shout out to some, people who got married, and, and I'll just do sort of light commentary. But one thing that I always try to do is like, I never try to be mean to real people. Like, I don't ever want there to be a write-up in the New York Times wedding section and I'm like, stupid dress, like I try to always just be, like if I'm making fun of anything, I'm making fun of like just that, I'll be like, that's a hat trick in Vows. Like she went to Yale, he went to Harvard, and they met at the, the Greenwich, like a country club in Greenwich, Connecticut, but I do try to never, ever be mean, because like, especially these, the last 4 years, like I ain't got time for bad energy and mean stuff. Like I'm just here to be silly and fun.
And you're silly and fun, and you're an expert on weddings at this point. I'd ask you this: if this is good, I'd ask if this is good etiquette, right? I've been to so many weddings in New Jersey. Me and my wife have been to 50 weddings together in the last 10 years, right? We
Oh
got
my
more, and we
God.
have more on the horizon. We'll probably be to 65%.
It never ends.
Yeah, we got a bunch of cousins, a bunch of younger friends. So let me ask you what you think about this tactic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I go to the wedding with a card and a blank check and a pen in my sport coat pocket, right? And I look at the cocktail hour and I base the check on what I see at the cocktail hour. Like if we're looking at a raw bar, there might be an extra zero at the end of that present, right?
Yes, I love that.
You can't give raw bar money to somebody with crudité taste. Is that fair?
Oh my God, that I might need to steal that catchphrase because that is phenomenal. And I 1000% agree. I mean, and also I would imagine you're Italian. Am I right?
Yes.
And so I went to a New Jersey wedding, my friend who's Italian, and oh my gosh, no one does a cocktail hour better than Italians. Like I thought it was dinner. The amount of cheese and like meats, like I remember I just started chowing and Sherry, the bride, was like, oh yeah, I'm excited. Once we go into we'll start dancing, then we have dinner. And I was like, I cannot believe this isn't dinner, like an ice sculpture. I mean, it was absolutely glorious. And
a Jersey Italian wedding. This is from someone who had one himself, right?
Yeah.
It's like a mixture between like New York City aristocrats, medieval times, the restaurant, and an EDM music festival. That's the way we do it in New Jersey.
Oh my God, I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Sorry, that is absolutely amazing. And I 1000% agree. I mean, it was also one of those, I found this fascinating, those mansions that exist in New Jersey, and they're just for weddings. It's just a wedding venue. But there's beautiful columns. And, I was like, oh, did this used to be like a rich person's house? And it's like, no, this is just a wedding venue.
And at some point, about 10:30, Skrillex is being played at that beautiful mansion.
Yeah. Oh, I have photos of us on the dance floor, and yeah, it looks like you're in like a crazy bonkers discotheque.
Yeah. Hey, I really appreciate your time so far in this episode. I'm really having a blast talking weddings with you. But before we go any further, we talked when we were setting this up that you've kind of retired from performing in the past year or two. What's going on with that?
Yes. Yeah. I'm actually really happy to talk about this because it's funny. I've had friends be like, oh, you're just not getting booked. I mean, I think people just assume I'm not getting booked anymore. And I mean, it doesn't matter either way, but yeah, so I put out my album in late 2017. It was late 2017. And that summer, a few months before I put my album out, right after I recorded it, a good friend of mine from childhood died very suddenly. And it just sort of recalibrated some stuff for me, I think it made me once I put the album out, I sort of felt like at peace of these are my favorite closers. These are my favorite jokes. It was, I'd been at stand up maybe 15 years at that point. I just felt like I was so proud of the work that I put out on that album. I'm so proud of it. Seen better days. But yeah, after that, stand up just sort of stopped being as much fun. And so 2018, 2019, I was still performing, but and I was still having fun, but it's just a little less fun than before. And, in my 9-to-5 job, I was getting promoted and I needed to also really, I used to work late on Friday nights because it was I just found that it was harder to balance the two. And then, so then it was funny because then with January 2020, I looked at my calendar and I saw that my birthday, I'd be turning 40 in April 2020. And I was like, maybe, and my birthday was going to hit April 25th. It was going to hit on a Saturday night of, 2020. And obviously I didn't know a pandemic was coming. But I just thought to myself, I was like, what if I booked the duplex where I recorded my album and I did one, I basically either recorded another album there or I did just one final show and I'm turning 40 and it's a Saturday night and I tell all my friends to come out at the end of the show. I say, and I'm done, and of course then, the entire world is shut down. But so because, with the pandemic, I just thought, Selena, this is such a great opportunity to just hang it up, because I really think, strangely, I felt like my stage fright was increasing in the last few months of 2019 into 2020. And I've always battled pretty bad stage jitters. I think I've always had really had an abnormal level of anxiety and fear before I go on stage. And usually once I'm on stage, it's great and I feel like I'm flying. But I just, yeah, I like saw a doctor about getting medicated for it perhaps, but then I was like, I feel like that would screw up my timing. Anyway, long and rambly way of saying, I think that I was ready to hang it up. And so when the pandemic happened and we all had to take up a moment, I was asked to do Zooms and I said no. And I just felt like this is a great moment for me to step away from it and to hang it up. And I'm really a-okay with that decision because I have other outlets. I have NYT Vows, so that keeps the joke creator brain churning. And then I have a silly podcast that I do about candles, although I'm really slacking on it. I got to get back to it. But I think it's important to know, like, there are so many ways to be creative, and some of them are on stage at an open mic or at a show, but some of them are on Twitter or on Instagram or making videos, or I also think, like, I'm such a believer in the way that I think that there's so much joy in creation and whatever that looks like, whether that's cooking, whether that's macrame, whether that's growing cool plants. Like, I don't know. I know I'm sounding pretty hippy dippy here, but I think that my performing, I don't really have that instinct anymore, but I am excited to continue creating just in a different way.
And I think that's a great way to end this episode. I really appreciate your time. Super interested to see whatever you do next. And I'm looking forward to the next Instagram post from NYT Vows. Selena, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Angelo. This was a blast.